Lisa Wooninck began her 20-year career as a research fishery biologist at NOAA, National Oceanographic Atmospheric Association, fisheries headquarters in the Santa Cruz lab. She joined Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary as a policy analyst, and then the West Coast Regional Team in 2010 as a policy coordinator for the 5 sanctuaries on the West Coast. Lisa has a Ph.D. in ecology and evolutionary biology from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Her interest in policy and marine resources management stems from her time as a NOAA Grant Fellow in Congressman Sam Farr's office in Washington, D.C. So she has a breadth of experience. We're really happy to have her here today and lucky to have her. And welcome, Lisa.
So I'm going to ask, my voice projects. So honestly, do you want me to use the microphone or can I just use my voice?
Need the mic. Need the microphone.
You do need the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do my best. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, good morning. I think that Stephanie should be the one who does the presentation on the Monterey Bay National Sanctuary. But thank you for the invitation today, and I want to let you know that I follow the recommendations for the ballot measures and for the elections from the League of Women Voters before I cast my ballot. So I wanted to say thank you for always issuing those guidance. It's a huge service to all of us who are trying to figure out how best to vote. So I really love what you do, and you really provide a very valuable service to our communities and to communities across the nation. So thank you for inviting me today. And just a show of hands, how many of you have gone to our visitor center in Santa Cruz? A lot of you, wow, thank you. We also have a visitor center down south in San Simeon, right across from the entrance to Hearst Castle. How many of you have been to that one? Fewer. So I recommend that whenever Highway 1 is open again, that when you drive by, it's just like the Sanctuary Exploration Center in Santa Cruz. It's free, it's open on the weekends and on Fridays, and it's a great way to experience what the sanctuary is about without getting wet. Because you can also go out there just 400 yards from here and get in the sanctuary and enjoy it. And that is something that I encourage everybody to do because it is an incredible resource for all of us. I think a lot of us live here because we love the environment, but it's also, the ocean is also a great place to come to peace. And I think the word sanctuary is very apt for that instance. So 52 years ago, Congress had some very good ideas. They passed in 1972 a number of very significant legislation, monumental legislation. The Clean Water Act, there's some people in here that work on that. The Coastal Zone Management Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, but what I think was the best act they passed was the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. Because what makes National Marine Sanctuaries so unique is it takes clean water, Coastal Zone Management Act, Marine Mammal Protection Act, the National Marine Fisheries, the Magnuson-Stevens Act. It takes all of those together and it considers them comprehensively in a coordinated fashion. So what we do is really looks across all of the user groups that engage with the sanctuary, and we try to come up with the best solution to sustainably protect the resource. So I want to really focus on we're protecting, but we also want people to sustainably use those resources. So 50 years, just 2 years ago, we celebrated our 50th anniversary for the entire act. Monterey Bay was designated 30 years ago, or 32 years ago, so the same year we celebrated our 30th. And where's this leading to? We are looking forward to the next 50 years. So what are national marine sanctuaries? So I could focus on all of the resources that are out there, and I think the best way for you to really experience what all those resources are out there is to go to one of our visitor centers. But what we do is really what we're about. And what we do is done with a lot of you. So I want to focus on that in this presentation. But if you look at our act, we are areas of the marine environment with special conservation, recreational, ecological, historical, cultural, archaeological, or aesthetic qualities. So that covers a lot. I hope that it gives you an inkling about how comprehensive we are. Because within our sanctuary, we aren't just interested in the amazing kelp forest with the more than 500 species of invertebrates that live here. We're also protecting the cultural values, the maritime heritage resources like sunken shipwrecks. We're interested in those aesthetic qualities that I talked about, the health. So, and how do we do that? We improve management through research. We have a very active research team. We help coastal economies by promoting and protecting healthy resources, because that tourism that is giving a lot of people in this area a job really depends on a healthy ocean. People wouldn't want to come here if the marine environment was degraded. So healthy economies depend on a healthy, thriving marine ecosystem. We facilitate public use compatible with resource protection. So we're about resource protection, but we still promote those sustainable uses. And we raise public awareness and understanding through education and outreach, the visitor centers that we have school programming, and we do community engagement through our advisory council that you heard about from Stephanie. And we have many volunteer and stewardship programs, so if any of you are interested, I can tell you about them, and public events like today. So this slide was true 2 weeks ago, but now we have 16 national marine sanctuaries, 2 monuments, and growing. So if you look at this slide, the white dots with the blue rings, those are the already established national marine sanctuaries. The triangles are marine national monuments that we manage, and the yellow boxes are sanctuaries that are being designated as we speak. And if you see, we have 2 national marine monuments in the Pacific Island region, and 2 marine sanctuaries. Papahanaumokuakea and the Pacific Remote Islands are currently monuments going through a designation process. Here on the West Coast, we have 5 national marine sanctuaries, 1 being designated to the south of us, Chumash Heritage. And on the East Coast and in the Great Lakes region, we have 8 national marine sanctuaries with actually now 2 being designated, because Lake Ontario was designated 2 weeks ago. We finished the designation process, so now we have 16 national marine sanctuaries. And this is huge for us. For many, many years, for 20 years or so, we were only 13 sites. And I can talk to you about how we've been growing and what's the impetus behind that, but that will be a separate presentation. But we cover about 620,000 square miles of ocean, the size of Alaska. So now just coming a little bit closer to home, here the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. It's the northern boundary is just across the Golden Gate Bridge, and it goes all the way down to Cambria, and right here in San Simeon is where I told you is our visitor center. It has this very funny belly that comes out. That's 30 miles from shore. And then in 2008, we added Davidson Seamount to the sanctuary, and that is also a phenomenal area. That's where the octopus garden is, if any of you have been following some of the research that we do there. But this is 276 miles of coastline, 1/4 of the state of California, more than 6,000 square miles of ocean. So this is huge. The only way that we can manage this area is by working with others. So I'm going to be focusing a little bit on that. But a little bit more about the sanctuary. Stephanie told you, designated in 1992. Amazing biodiversity here. And the reason for the biodiversity is because of the upwelling that occurs here, bringing up the cold, nutrient-rich waters. We have the canyon, so even more nutrient-rich waters come up. And the number of species that come and visit this area just to feed is off the charts. And this area really is an example of marine protection near urban centers. And if you watch any nature shows, how many of you seen the Netflix series Our Great National Parks? I hope you notice that so it was globally speaking national parks. The only national park that they talked about in the United States was Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And it talked about the success story of this sanctuary being near urban centers and how just protecting an area and focusing this comprehensive coordinated management in an area, how you can really bring it back. And now the area is thriving not because of whale hunts, but because of watching wildlife, watching it responsibly. So how do we manage an area as large as the sanctuary that we have? We have to focus in on certain priorities. We have our management plan, but even the management plan itself is pretty comprehensive. I wouldn't say exactly diffuse, but we still need to focus on some of the priorities. So the priorities that we have for the next now 4 years are marine debris, linking marine microplastics to land-based pollution. For example, all the ag plastics that you see in our area that really help the also very vibrant agricultural industry that we have here, billion-dollar industry, but those plastics end up in the watershed and they end up eventually into the ocean. So we have a very great program. If you ever want to have a speaker talk about this, I can recommend Jasmine Mejia Munoz. She is leading this ag plastic project. We also do whale conservation, addressing threats from noise, ships striking whales, and entanglements. We are doing work on Icona kelp forest, because I'll be getting into these two a little bit more in depth. Climate change, vessel incidents, the number of boats that run aground, sink in the sanctuary also cause a lot of damage because they have fuel on board, and when they break up in the very dynamic surf zone that we have here, you have all that plastic and flotsam also spewing into the sanctuary, and wildlife disturbances. So we're promoting responsible wildlife viewing. Another priority we have is connecting more with communities, like through this type of a presentation that I'm giving to you today. But we're really focusing on indigenous community engagement. I recently had an article in the newspaper about a meeting that we had, a cross-Pacific Indigenous exchange. Also, diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion, connecting and enhancing access. We primarily do this through a lot of the work that we do with school groups. A vision for the southern region. That's a lot of our focus could be just right here along the bay, but we also have a sanctuary that goes all the way up to the north, but also across the Big Sur area. So we want to focus on getting more comprehensive management in that area, working with the recreational fishing community to really emphasize that we do promote and support sustainable fisheries, because I think the fishing community in particular thinks that the sanctuary prohibits access and prohibits fishing in the sanctuary. And exhibits and signage, so we're trying to do refresh new signs at our visitor centers and along trails. So how do we accomplish our work? I have a fantastic team of individuals. Some of them are federal employees, but we also have a lot of contractors. We have interns, fellows, and they focus on coordinating and developing partnerships to do the work that we need to do to manage the sanctuary. And when I say manage the sanctuary, what we're really doing, we're not managing those resources necessarily. What we're doing is we're managing human behavior. That is what we're working on. So we have a research and monitoring team, a resource protection team, and an outreach, education, and community engagement team. And here you can see these lovely individuals. Casey is a newer addition to our team, and they do phenomenal work. They go out, they create those partnerships that we need to do the work to cover 6,000 square miles of ocean. We also have our advisory council. What I love about working for the sanctuaries is not only do we engage with the community during the designation process, which is part of the National Environmental Policy Act. You have to go out and ask the community, what do you think about our proposed regulations? What do you think about the proposed boundaries? We get responses. There's sort of this great dialogue that happens during the designation. But as a sanctuary, we continue with that dialogue through our advisory council. And the advisory council represents the community that the sanctuary is adjacent to. So not all advisory councils are the same. It depends on the community. So on our advisory council, which is very unique, we have representatives from the agricultural community, right? Because we have such a vibrant agricultural industry, it's very important that we have representation from them. But on that council, we have representation from tourism and business, recreational fishing, commercial fishing, and Dan was on it at one point. You served two not terms, but
tours.
Yeah, 2 tours, not terms, tours. And Stephanie was on it. And are there any other people here? I'm a recent superintendent, so are there any other? You were also, yes? So Tracy? Yeah, thank you, Tracy. So thank you for your service. If any of you are interested in joining that advisory council, we meet 4 times a year, plus we have a retreat. We're going to have another round of recruitments in August 2024. We have the at-large San Luis Obispo County, at-large Monterey County, commercial fishing, college. We're really trying to get more youth engagement, conservation, and business. We publicize that we have this recruitment in the newspaper, or if you are interested, you can always send me an email. We also have our foundation and board that Dan serves on. They principally do fundraising, donations. They raise the profile of the sanctuary. They have the Sea Star Gala and Awards. This year it's going to be again at the Tehama Golf Course in Carmel. This is the golf course owned by Clint Eastwood. Newspaper articles. So if any of you have still get the Santa Cruz Sentinel, through work that Dan started, I'm now able to publish a monthly article and through outreach. And so you can see here on our board, we have people like Secretary Panetta, Fred Keeley, others from Santa Cruz. And I'm remiss in making the remark that the sanctuary was really designated through the groundswell of support that originated on this side of the bay. Santa Cruz, Aptos, Capitola really spearheaded the designation of the sanctuary, and this part of the bay still continues to support the sanctuary very, very well. We also have the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. What they do is they really help us with some of the programs that we have. I'll be talking about the Ship Strike program at the end of this presentation, but they also help us with outreach and education for the statewide network of MPAs that are co-located in the sanctuary. So we have different levels of government in the ocean. One of them is the sanctuary, the federal protection, but we also have the state protection through the marine protected areas. And other types of protections through the Regional Water Quality Board, and et cetera. So now I'm going to pivot to 2 of the priorities. First, I'm going to talk about iconic kelp in the sanctuary, and then I'll be talking about the whale ship strike issue. So kelp forests are valuable and a very iconic habitat in the sanctuary. They are habitat for many different species. They're important for fisheries. They're important for feeding species of aquaculture, divers. They drive a lot of the tourism. People come here to see the kelp forest. And how many of you have ever been diving or snorkeling in the kelp? Yeah, it's great to see that. If you get a chance, it rivals, it's very spiritual, and I think it rivals the experience that you have visiting a cathedral in Europe or walking through the redwoods that we have here. And we're so lucky. We have redwoods, we have the kelp. What a great place to live, and to live in a community that really cares about that and wants to protect it. So first, a little bit about what are kelp. They basically are large brown algae, a type of seaweed. Where are they? They live in areas where there's cool ocean and grow on relatively shallow reefs. But what we've discovered as we keep on exploring more in the ocean, you can also find brown kelp in tropical areas, but in the areas where the water is cool, in the very deep, but where the sunlight still penetrates. And that is a more recent discovery. What do kelp do? They convert sunlight into energy. They take in that CO2, so they're very important for climate change. Kelp often form these dense groupings, creating a forest underwater. What you will see is some kelp can grow 10 to 12 inches in a day, forming these very dense canopies that you can see at the surface, right, when the kelp is growing. And they provide food and habitat for fishes, invertebrates, and marine mammals. So there are two types of kelp that we really focus on. That's giant kelp. That's the one that has multiple air bladders. And then there's bull kelp, which has this one main bladder, and then the blades come off of it. So here in the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, we're right in the area where you have both. But bull kelp tend to be more to the north, off of Marin and Sonoma County, and giant kelp tend to be more to the south. So if you were to go to Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary in the Southern California Bight, you only find giant kelp. And giant kelp, that blade, is the iconic image of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. There are other kelp species that include this Pterogophora, Icinia, and Laminaria. Some of these grow in the understory of the giant kelp or bull kelp, but they also grow, outside of them. And then what I want to emphasize in this part about kelp is it's a very dynamic system. So when I start talking about the urchin barrens and the different species, I want you to know that it can change over time, long time periods and over decades, but also over seasons. And Monterey Bay previously, so now Monterey Bay is dominated by giant kelp, but back in the 1940s, it was dominated by bull kelp. And I'll get a little bit into, I'll go back. One of the things I should have said here is that they each also have different life histories. Giant kelp are more like the plants in your yard that are perennials, like the, I can't think of one right now, I'm a gardener. Fruit trees, I guess. And bull kelp are more the annuals, like the poppies, right? So this one, it will die off, it will get ripped out, but it will continue to grow, it produces spores. This one, it dies off, completely dies off at the end of the season, and it depends on the seeds that it sends out to create the next generation of bull kelp. So those two life histories have a lot to do with how they're responding to some of the changes that we are seeing in the environment in the last decade. So there are different states of kelp forest communities. There's the kelp-dominated, the transitional, and the urchin-dominated. So this is a conceptual model using icons that we recently developed based on recommendations by our advisory council to use for presentations like I'm doing today. And it was supported by the National Marine Sanctuaries and the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, the development. This is the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation logo. So if we look at this, you can see when the rocky reef community is dominated by kelp, the temperature is low because, remember, kelp like cold water. They don't like warm water. When the temperature is low and they're growing really well, they'll create drift algae. There's lots of drift algae. The drift algae is eaten by the urchins and other herbivores. Urchins typically hide in crevices because they are afraid to be eaten by their predators, like otters or giant sea stars. So when the kelp when the community is kelp dominated, you have low urchins, and whatever urchins you have, they're hiding in crevices from the predators and the other grazers. And you have lots of otters, other predators, and there's little human intervention to step in to bring the community to the kelp-dominated state. Again, cold water. What has been happening in the last decade? Yeah, we've been having lots of ocean warming. We've been having these heat wave events, these warm water blobs that are coming down from Alaska, really causing a lot of chaos. And part of it is the kelp don't like it. They don't grow well. They don't thrive. So what happens when you're in the transitional kelp community? The temperature rises. When the temperature rises, the kelp don't do well. So there isn't a lot of drift kelp. Drift algae is low. But the urchins, they start coming out of the crevices because they're hungry. They're looking for food. They're not so afraid to be eaten by the predators. Other grazers come out. The otter community. So what happens when, I'll get to that in the next slide. But anyways, otters, if you don't have a lot of predators to keep the urchin community down, the urchin community will explode. And urchins apparently also like warm water. They recruit more. You have more babies growing in warm water. So this is the transitional state. This is what we're seeing in many areas across the state and including in our sanctuary. And then you have the urchin dominated. So here the temperature is persistently high. There's hardly any drift algae. The urchins come out. They are voracious predators and they form these urchin barrens. And they basically mow down any kelp. They climb up the stipes and they eat anything that's out there. And it's very hard then to have this community to go back to kelp domination, because any small kelp that recruit to the area, they just basically get eaten by these guys. So in this instance, you do need human intervention. The community will not naturally recover on its own. So I want to make the distinction between natural recovery, which the system often will do on its own. When you look at the coast of California, you will see that there are many areas over time, many areas over space, that are vacillating between kelp domination, transition, and urchin barrens. They're just naturally going between the two, what we call two alternative states. But one of the things that we've noticed with this persistent warm water globally, that all kelp forests globally are slowly in decline. That you're seeing fewer kelp-dominated communities, fewer transitional kelp communities, and more these urchin-dominated communities. Which is, of course, concern, because urchin-dominated communities don't have the amazing kelp that provide all of those benefits that I talked about, that are habitat for all the other species. They're a place that people want to dive. This isn't as much of a fun place to dive in as this, right? I don't think divers want to come and hang out in urchin-dominated. And one of the things I didn't mention is these urchins, they're basically zombies. You would think that they would die, but they have no gonads, they have no reproductive structure, but they continue to live. And so even if we were to bring in more predators, they don't want to eat this. They're basically these hollow, hard shells. And Casey, do you want to add to that anything? Because Casey's an avid diver.
Oh, just sea otters are very smart. They know that there's nothing in there, so they don't want to waste their time. They'd rather go to a healthy kelp forest.
Yeah.
And eat there.
So this is a very difficult situation, and this is something that we are studying as a sanctuary. This all just recently happened, and I will get into, so here you can see there's still some stipes, there's still some algae, and now you can see they're climbing up the kelp stipe and they're eating whatever they can.
Excuse me, may I ask a question?
Yes.
At what temperature is the urchin-dominated thing happening?
Well, so I imagine it's more around anything above 55, 58, 60 persistent. I don't really know the exact temperature, but typically the temperature out here is mid 50s. And I think it also depends on when the temperature is spiking into 62, 65 degrees. I don't know the exact parameters of that, but it's warmer.
Thank you.
So kelp dominated, urchin dominated. When we think about restoring, and some of the restoration methods include removing the urchins, what we call also culling the urchins by hitting them with small hammers. So what you're going to do really depends on the kelp species, the reason for the decline, budgetary constraints, how big of an area are you trying to restore, the temporal commitment, because when you go in and start removing urchins from an area, you have to do that persistently, consistently through time, because the urchins will come in from other areas. So how long are we talking about? So these are all things that we're trying to study. Just to let you know about the changes in kelp cover in Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, Kelp Watch is an organization that provides free information about the status of kelp. It is at a resolution of 30 by 30 meters. It's really fantastic to use for regional coverage. The information is collected quarterly, and as I said, the data is publicly available. You could go to their website. The 30 by 30 meter resolution is high enough to sort of see what's happening on the surface. Remember that canopy that I was talking about? But if you really want to know what's happening on the reef in the kelp forest, you really need it on a meter scale, and that really requires more using drones or uncrewed aerial systems or divers. But right, the sanctuary is huge. We will never have enough divers to cover the entire sanctuary, but using some of this technology will help us better understand what's going on. So the satellite coverage is really at the end of the summer, which we call quarter 3, and you can see what happened around the Monterey Peninsula over time. You can see that in 2008 there was lots of kelp surrounding the Monterey Peninsula, and this is an area that is very actively dived. Lots of dive clubs come to the Monterey Peninsula to see the amazing kelp forest. This is 2023. So you can see the areas where kelp could be in this sort of pink, and this shows you which areas still have canopy. And you can see what happens through time. And this red box here is just showing the heat waves of 2014, 15, and 16. This is closer to Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz has actually been doing much better. And this shows you the different areas of the sanctuary, from the Santa Cruz area in the red box, the Monterey Peninsula in the green box. You can't see that very well. And then we also have a box covering Big Sur. Sorry. And so when you look at this, you can see the average amount of kelp is the green line for the area to the north around Santa Cruz, where we are now, the Monterey Peninsula and Big Sur. And you can see that the average amount of kelp in Monterey, around Santa Cruz and around has always been pretty low, but it bounces around that average. And it actually came back after the heat wave. So you can see this spike, and then it came down again. Around the Monterey Peninsula, it has been in a steady decline. And around Big Sur, it has also been bouncing around. It has come back, but it's gone down again. So not all areas of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary look like the Monterey Peninsula. So that is also something that we're studying. Like, why are some of these other areas still continue to be able to have natural recovery, and what's happening here at the Monterey Peninsula that's different? And here you can see those 3 areas divided up: Big Sur, Monterey Peninsula, and Santa Cruz. Most of the kelp in the sanctuary is really around Big Sur. But you can see that there's been a steady decline over time. This matches exactly what we're seeing globally. So this is just summarizing that the kelp is patchily distributed across the sanctuary. The diversity of kelp status and recovery offers opportunities to better understand where natural recovery should be supported and where restoration should take place. And I hope you understand that natural recovery is a lot easier. It's what's been happening through millennia. It's a lot cheaper, so better understanding where should we allow natural recovery to occur and where should we step in and do restoration. And we have, so what are we doing as a sanctuary? So one of the first things that we did is we turned to our advisory council and said, what do you think we should do? So they tasked our research activity panel from the advisory council to come up with some science recommendations. And these are the recommendations that they forwarded to me, the superintendent. There's some general recommendations and some ones that are really focused on urchin dynamics. So we should monitor natural recovery with scuba and drones, determine factors that influence urchin disease. I mean, this might be the one time where we do want to have a disease. Determine sea urchin behavior, determine the role of sea otters, right? This is a predator that has really made an incredible comeback, and assess urchin density effects, but then also some general ones like document the historical perspective or develop a conceptual model of kelp forests. Check, we already did that. And so using these recommendations, they have gone into different, and these are community-based recommendations. That is so powerful, that community-based recommendation. So those recommendations have gone into grant proposals, and I'm very happy to report that some of them have received funding, like Dr. Mark Carr and Dr. Christy Coker from UCSC. They have received funding to carry out some of those projects that our research activity panel endorsed and that we as a sanctuary accepted. We've been doing work, working with divers and at Tanker Reef, doing some culling projects. We're testing drone capabilities for high-resolution kelp canopy assessments. We're so lucky we have the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute with whom we are doing those drone testing capabilities. We work a lot with our partners at the aquarium, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We're developing critical kelp parameters that we need to monitor. So when we can do these dive surveys, what parameters should we be studying so that we can understand what's happening with kelp, what's happening with urchins, doing outreach through newspapers and public presentations like today. And our advisory council just came up with some recommendations beyond the ones that were focused on science. They had a working group that met this April. They focused on recommendations for outreach and education, research and monitoring, and resource protection and policy. I just received them at the May meeting. We're now evaluating those recommendations, and we are developing a kelp action plan. I want to let you know that many times we accept the recommendations from the advisory council, but not all the time. Sometimes the advisory council asks us to do things that we're not allowed to do, but our partners can do them. So those recommendations are still valid, because one of the things that we're going to do, we're going to share those recommendations with our partners at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, because they're also going through a process developing a kelp restoration and management plan that covers the entire coast. But the recommendations that we will feed to them will help them get along the way, because we're covering the Central Coast area. And we use it for outreach events. So more to come on that. I want to emphasize that the work that we do is really done in partnership with many, many agencies, people, NGOs, and here's a number of them that we have been working with on the kelp issue. There's some of our divers, Chad King and Steve Lonhart. This is off of Big Sur in a very dense canopy of kelp. And so when you drive along there, you can still see kelp, right? But I want to emphasize that it has been in decline over the last decade in particular. So now I'm going to pivot to the other one about ship strikes and whales. So this is a project that we really work with on with our other sanctuaries on the West Coast. To the north, we have Greater Farallones and Cordell Bank. Then we have, and then Monterey Bay, and then Channel Islands. And then this is the area where the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary will be. So we can also coordinate with them when that designation will be completed, hopefully later this fall. So what are the threats to whales? The threats to whales are ship strikes. And the way that we try and address those ship strikes is we try to shift shipping lanes or ask vessels to slow down their speed. I'll be getting into that a little bit more. We also address entanglement risk by working with fishermen, testing novel gear and disentanglement assists. So that is another threat to whales. And the other threat to whales are noise. And we track whales using our access cruises and mobile applications like Ocean Alert. So if any of you who have your smartphone, you can download this app, Ocean Alert, and when you see a whale, you can record it. It goes into a database. It helps us better understand where the whales are and when should we be concerned about whale ship strikes or entanglements. And we do a lot of this in partnership with the Benny Hoff Ocean Initiative and other partners like U.S. Coast Guard, the EPA. But I'm really going to focus on the ship strike issue for this part of the presentation. So as I said, the way that we can reduce ship strikes is by not having ships and whales be in the same ocean space. So one of the ways that we can do that is by moving some of the shipping lanes, by extending them, making them smaller. So here you can see off of San Francisco, what is in pink, sorry, I'm not used to the microphone. What is in pink is what it used to be, and then what is in green is what we had the U.S. Coast Guard do in 2013. So you can see we extended the shipping lanes out of San Francisco. There's a northern, a central, or a western, and a southern lane, and we had them extended. So having them extend over the 200 fathom line, which is a line where whales would congregate to feed. So by having the ships be in a smaller area over that space, made it that there would be fewer co-occurrences between the whales and the ships, right? And here off of Channel Islands, we made the lanes narrower and we extended it further out. So that's one way to do it. But co-occurrence is still going to happen, right? So the other thing that we can do is we can ask ships to slow down. We're now in the phase where we're asking them to voluntarily slow down. That is another thing that Sanctuaries does. We have a lot of voluntary measures. We don't always go out with the big regulatory stick. We also educate and try to encourage users to do the right thing. And this is one of them. So we asked ships 300 gross tons or larger to slow down. Initially, we asked them to slow down around the shipping lanes. And we've been doing this since 2012, 2014. Originally, it was just Greater Farallones and Cordell Bank that were doing this. We asked them to slow down to 10 knots because there's been studies done that if ships go at that speed and they hit a whale, the lethality, the mortality that ensues from that type of a strike is not as high as when the ships are going faster. So we asked the shipping companies to do this. We work with the U.S. Coast Guard, with the National Marine Fisheries Service, and with the EPA to ask ships to slow down between May 1st and December 1st or 15th. That changes. And the reason we do it for that season is because that's when many of the whales are around here. The whales come here, like the humpback whales, they come through here. They're an endangered species. They are here in the summer months. They're hanging out here longer and longer, probably because of climate change, but that is sort of the season for blue whales, humpback whales, and fin whales. We have a similar zone down by Channel Islands where we ask the shipping companies to voluntarily slow down. In 2023, the Monterey Bay Advisory Council recommended that Monterey Bay also join this voluntary vessel speed reduction. Yay! So we joined in 2023, and you can see now ships are asked to slow down 10 knots or less through all of the sanctuaries, which is huge. I'm so happy that, and it was a unanimous vote for us to join. So that's the voluntary speed reduction. You probably want to know, well, what is the outcome? Are the shipping companies participating? Are they cooperating? So if you look at this from 2017 to 2023, you can see that more and more ships started cooperating, from 45% cooperation to 67% cooperation around the San Francisco Bay, Monterey Bay region. And for the Southern California region, this region, it has also grown to 64%. What I find so fantastic about this number is, remember, in 63, that is the year, in 2023, that is the year that Monterey Bay joined. And we still had an increase in cooperation. And we have often conversations with the shipping companies, and they actually liked that it was more consistent throughout all of the sanctuaries, so that they wouldn't have to think about, should I go 10? Should I go faster? They thought it was easier to cooperate by having it be across all sanctuaries. And for the 2024 season, the season that we're in now, we have it for the Central Coast region going from May 1st to December 31st, because we've noticed that in the last 5 years or so, the whales are sticking around. Why they're sticking around is probably pretty complicated, but it has to do with food availability in the areas to the north by Alaska. They're probably, because of the ice caps melting and the warming water, there's less food from them up there, so they're hanging around here longer. So we think that we should have it go longer. So we have that program. We also have a tandem program with the regional air quality districts called Protecting Blue Whales and Blue Skies. And this is an incentive-based program where we ask the companies to enroll in a program, and the companies that we're asking to enroll are container ships, car carrier, bulk cargo, and tanker vessels. And the benefits to them to slowing down is we use positive press for them, and saying that they are demonstrating environmental values to customers. It's safer for the ships, and it's positive press for them. Because I don't know how many of you invest your dollars in environmentally sound companies. This is something that they could use to say, you know, invest in us because we are involved in this program. And as part of this program, when ships slow down, they reduce their greenhouse gas pollution. They reduce the amount of sulfur that goes into the air, and it reduces the lethal ship strikes, and it reduces ocean noise. Many of these cargo container ships are becoming larger and noisier, masking the communication avenues that whales and other species need. So their tagline is cleaner air, safer whales, and a quieter ocean. And this program has been growing over time. And I want to let you know that just this week, Congressman Salud Carbajal to the south and Congressman Jared Huffman to the north, they introduced legislation that will take this program and have it be West Coast wide. So this is legislation in the House of Congress. So just to let you know, this does not go through 2023. I couldn't find, I'm sorry, but this gives you an inkling of how this program has been growing. The number of companies that have been participating, 16. These are companies, right? Like big, they own several vessels. More and more vessels are participating. The distance where they are slowing down has been increasing over time. The overall fleet cooperation, which is what I showed you earlier, 36%, 55, 60, 64. And remember the last slide I showed you was 67. The amount of nitrogen gases that are released in tons, the reduction has been growing over time. So fewer harmful pollution, fewer more and more greenhouse gas reductions over time. This is being studied by Scripps Institute. They go out and they listen to the ocean. There's a quieter ocean. And the ship strike reduction, this is a complicated mathematical equation, but we have reduced ship strike risk by 50% by asking ships to slow down. What we really want to get to is 75%, but this is still pretty good.
Lisa, we're going to need to wind up.
This is the last one.
People are
sorry.
an annual meeting.
Sorry, we're done. This is the last one.
We started a little late.
So thank you. That's it.
Okay.